but he's still considering military action in response to protesters' deaths.
A meeting is being set up, but we may have to act because of what's happening before the meeting.
President Trump's motorcade rerouted due to a suspicious object yesterday. Details from Sue Guzman.
President Trump's motorcade from Mar-a-Lago to Palm Beach International made some adjustments after another suspicious object was found during a security sweep around the airport in West Palm Beach. During the rerouting, police officers on motorcycles created a moving blockade for the motorcade. Comes about 4 months after a suspicious hunting stand with a direct line of sight to where the president exits Air Force One was also discovered at Palm Beach International. An FBI investigation concluded that stand had been there for months before it was discovered.
Last week, the House Oversight Committee heard testimony from Minnesota Republicans about widespread welfare fraud in the state. Those lawmakers accused Governor Tim Walz and State Attorney General Keith Ellison of ignoring and silencing whistleblowers. Committee Chair James Comer says he's calling on Democrats to testify and asking government employees to alert Congress about fraud in their states.
I don't care if it's Republican fraud or Democrat fraud, Somali fraud or American fraud. It doesn't matter. We want to get serious about identifying wage fraud and abuse, eliminating it, and holding people accountable.
A former Texas inmate turned ministry leader says the Texas prison system has a stricter policy on sexually explicit books than public schools. Robert Thornton has more.
The Christian Post reports that former inmate David Stokely leads a Houston, Texas area Christian ministry that focuses on mentoring at-risk youth and steering them away from the past that led to his own incarceration. In a recent interview on the Real Texans podcast, Stokely expressed shock upon discovering the content in certain school library books he says are far more graphic than items routinely rejected for inmates under Texas Department of Criminal Justice policies.
Whenever I seen what they were doing going before the school boards and I seen the videos, it really attracted me to it because I have a heart for kids. So they sent them to me, some of the book reports, and I read this, and I'm a father of 2 daughters. They're 20 and 22 now. But I was just thinking about when they were young, and had one of them brought one of these books home, my blood pressure would have been through the roof.
Mary Elizabeth Castle with Texas Values talked about a state measure that passed in September of 2025.
Senate Bill 13 is a statewide law that covers all 1,200 school districts in the state of Texas. They are required to have these library councils, make sure that they're weeding out all of these inappropriate books, making sure they're not within the standard of sexually explicit material. Just think of what would happen if we give these safe books to children who aren't mentally developed, who aren't emotionally developed, what it can do to their behavior. And I think that's the missing part of the conversation, too, how these sexually explicit books could cause violence or promiscuous behavior in the children.
I'm Robert Thornton.
On Friday, U.S. stocks rose to more records following a mixed report on the U.S. job market. The S&P 500 climbed 0.6%, the Dow Jones Industrial Average added 0.5%, and the NASDAQ Composite rose 0.8%. For American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh.
AFA Action takes attacks on the family seriously. The enemies of the family constantly employ new tactics to try to sneak past our radar. They know if we stand together, their evil plans will fail. Your gift to AFA Action allows us to stay vigilant against their onslaught. And if you give this month, you'll receive access to the Cultural Institute video When Your Faith is Illegal by Frank Harbor on AFA Stream as our thanks. You can make your gift today at afaaction.net.
Jenna Ellis in the morning on American Family Radio.
I love talking about the things of God because of truth and the biblical worldview. The U.S. Constitution obligates our government to preserve and protect the rights that our founders recognize come from God, our Creator, not our government. I believe that Scripture in the Bible is very clear that God is the one that raised up each of you, and God has allowed us to be brought here to this specific moment in time.
This is Jenna Ellis in the morning.
Good morning. It is Monday, January 12th, and over the weekend, the U.S. launched a large-scale strike on ISIS targets across Syria. The latest attack comes after U.S. forces struck ISIS infrastructure and weapons sites last month in retaliation for the deaths of 2 U.S. soldiers and a civilian interpreter. This coming from NBC. The U.S. has carried out what it called large-scale strikes against ISIS in Syria. U.S. Central Command announced Saturday afternoon the strikes conducted around 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time were part of Operation Hawkeye Strike, which the Pentagon said was ordered by President Donald Trump on December 19th in response to an ISIS ambush. On December 13th, that attack killed 2 U.S. soldiers and a U.S. civilian interpreter, U.S. officials said. The military in December launched strikes against Islamic State group infrastructure and weapons. The Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth posted about the strikes on X, saying, "We will never forget and never relent." So let's welcome in Scott Eulinger, who is a former CIA intelligence officer. And Scott, tell us more about these strikes and what we know at this point.
Well, those strikes were in retaliation for those deaths noted in Syria, and so it just shows you that the Syrian government, which frankly I myself am very skeptical of, is unable or unwilling to provide the security even for the Syrian people and for U.S. troops that we're used to. So those attacks were done. It's also interesting that there were other attacks conducted last night in different targets in Lebanon, and I think kind of all of them are sort of working to sort of with an eye toward the problems within Iran as a way of making the softening the ground a little bit against ISIS should Iran decide to retaliate, because that is in the mind of U.S. military planners that if and when there is a U.S. or Israeli action against Iran, then a lot of those forces that we've discussed are supported by Iran, the ones that the U.S. has already attacked and the ones the Israelis have already attacked. So this is a way of keeping your heads down should the Iranians, either because we attacked or in preparation, they order those units to attack U.S. bases in the area.
Well, and so what is the posture right now between the United States and Israel as an ally and Iran, especially considering what we talked about last week with Venezuela and with the oil supply, going to China and Iran and so forth, and our foreign policy with this? I mean, it seems like President Trump is very focused on a lot of these foreign policy issues. And I mean, obviously, there are some things domestically, but how does all of that play into this, if at all?
Well, like I said, yesterday Trump made the announcement that, frankly, I was almost expecting that this morning when I got up that I would find out that the U.S. had hit Iran. I think we're very close to doing so. But Trump did make a statement yesterday that indicated that the leadership, meaning the mullahs of Iran, have reached out to him. So there's a possibility here that there may be some kind of settlement, perhaps allowing the Ayatollah to move away and go somewhere else or something like that, similar to what we saw with Maduro. So I hope certainly that is one solution that I'll accept. Trump has shown he can think outside the box with this stuff and basically prevent massive U.S. involvement, and I think that's important to the American people. But at the same time, we do need to, the regime in Iran needs to be thrown on the dust heap of history. I mean, it's been our enemy since '79, and I'm acutely aware of that. I mean, I worked against them extensively when I was in the CIA. So, but I do think that, because basically it depends on the civilian deaths. Now, with internet down and even phones down in Iran, Starlink, thank God, is up a little bit, so it gives us a little bit of a picture. The Trump administration is looking very carefully at the civilian deaths. How massive is the retaliation against the Iranian people? And certainly if there are signs that there is massive mobilization to kill the Iranian people, then I think the U.S. will strike basically Islamic Revolutionary Guard, which is like the Waffen-SS of the Iranian regime. I think that those targets will be hit. I think in the Iranian regime, in fact, there are reports, the Iranian army and Iranian Air Force are not politically reliable for the mullahs. They are more tied to the people, and they're more likely to disobey orders. And so the regime is relying on the IRGC to do the enforcement because they have always been a tool of the regime. And there's also reports that foreign fighters are being brought in, Arabs, because the Ayatollah knows that foreigners are going to be a lot more likely to open fire on freedom-loving Iranians than their own people. And so that's a very cynical approach. But like I said, I guess there was a reported 3,000 deaths, and but I haven't seen anything yet to indicate that was a massive increase last night. So maybe the Ayatollahs have, basically gotten a stay of execution. But I do sort of feel that some kind of U.S. military action is almost inevitable, because I think to date the Iranians, with the amount of casualties they've taken and the fact that there's millions of people still on the streets, I think the Iranian people have shown to Trump and to the American people that they are willing to die for their freedoms. And so I think that warrants U.S. intervention to prevent wholesale massacre of the population.
Wow. And I'm speaking with Scott Eulinger, who is a former CIA officer. And so, we have all of these goals in terms of some U.S. intervention. And obviously, after Venezuela, the headlines were so predictable from the left, suggesting that this was an impeachable offense, that Trump went and captured Maduro. And we know that if Democrats take back Congress, that's inevitable that they're going to start all of these fake impeachments again. This is obviously something else that the left will disagree on just because it's Donald Trump. But how should conservatives frame this in terms of America's foreign interests here?
Well, basically, I mean, like I said, Iran has been an enemy of ours. They declare war on us in '79. We could ignore it all we want, but they declare war on us. They're responsible for the deaths of more than 250 of our troops in Iraq during the Iraq War. And, when it comes to blowing up Jews in Argentina or hitting synagogues all over the world, or Christian targets, the Iranians will stop at nothing. So I have no problem eliminating them off the face of the earth, especially if it's not going to involve the large-scale deployment of U.S. troops. And that is certainly Trump's plan. He's not going to do that. But the other interesting thing to take a step back from all this foreign stuff, whether it's Venezuela or Iran, is other people have written this, but I get the impression that what Trump is doing is, these opportunities have kind of presented themselves, I guess, in a way. But Trump is dealing with them as promptly as he can, because I believe, for instance, the Venezuelan arrests are going to reveal massive democratic cooperation with Venezuela, with the Smartmatic voting machines technology, election stealing technology that the Venezuelans exported in Dominion voting systems, which are in our country. We're using this technology. So this is all part, I believe, of a strategy where basically by neutralizing our foreign enemies and stuff, that is when Trump is going to, Maduro will go on trial. They will make all of these things apparent to the American people, and then perhaps we're going to start seeing some high-level arrests for corruption within the United States. Because although Americans are impatient for justice, and I sympathize with that, I think certainly Trump himself, who has been on the receiving end of huge amounts of injustice with trials, with having his property searched, I'm sure he is looking for the same level of justice that the rest of America is looking for. It's just he understands how the timing and is working in the government. And so by eliminating these foreign threats, he's also clearing the board to make some major moves within the United States because he understands that our democracy, that our republic is at risk.
Yeah, and Pete Hegseth said in December that the operation was not the beginning of war. It's a declaration of vengeance, which I think really encapsulates exactly what you've been describing, Scott Eulinger. And moving forward, I wanted to switch topics in the last 5 minutes or so we have with you and ask you about the issue of Greenland, because the left is completely just horrified and shocked and appalled and all of the other reactions that they always have to anything that President Trump does when he's still talking about the U.S. acquiring Greenland. And it's very interesting that even Senator John Fetterman now appears to be supportive of the U.S. taking Greenland either by purchase. He likened it to the acquisition of the Louisiana Purchase and Alaska as territory in American history. And I think people forget that land boundaries can change. I mean, this certainly isn't off the table. And it's something that Trump has been quite serious about for a while. What would that look like? And do you anticipate that that's likely to happen during his administration?
I actually think it is likely to happen at this point. What's really pitiful is to see the reaction of the Europeans, who seem to have learned absolutely nothing about Trump. They're so educated, they know nothing because, you know, when he says things about invade Greenland, I mean, that idea is ludicrous. He's basically setting the parameters of a deal, but yet you have like French generals literally saying, we're going to fight over this. They're just embarrassing themselves that they're so thick-headed. They cannot understand this is all a Trump negotiating tactic. Now, there's already reports that Rubio is meeting with Greenland leadership and Danish leadership. So I think that we very well could see something like this. You have to understand that the idea of Greenland being having some relationship with the United States was discussed as early as the Eisenhower administration. So this is not a new idea. It's a new idea perhaps in my lifetime, but this idea was floated around in the mid-'50s because of the threat of Soviet nuclear weapons. So I think this is going to go forward. It's possible. I don't think it's not going to be something like statehood or something like that, or even a territory like Puerto Rico. I think it's going to be the relationship is going to be more like I forget the phrase. It's like an agreement of like strategic cooperation, and it's an agreement that basically we will invest in your country. And basically, we will take care of the foreign policy and all. And you basically will just hang out there, and the United States will kind of run the foreign policy. That is what is done with U.S. territories in the Pacific, such as the Mariana Islands, et cetera, are U.S. affiliated. They're not U.S. territories, and they're not U.S. states like Hawaii. Or like American Samoa is a territory, but they're a lower status, a status that they are basically very strongly affiliated with the United States. So I think that that's what will happen because that is, I think, the most palatable to Greenlanders who basically want to have some kind of nominal independence from Denmark. They don't necessarily want to go from Danish rule to being part of the United States, or maybe that'll be later on in the game. But in the beginning, it's going to start out with the way I portrayed it, similar to our relationship to certain areas of the Pacific.
So a strategic partnership agreement is what I think you're talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's what it is. It's a strategic partnership agreement. Exactly.
Yeah, and we're already out of time, Scott Eulinger, but I think that's really fascinating, and it makes a lot more sense to look at the nuance again, right? Which we always have to do instead of just the leftist headlines that are, full of trauma and volatility, to actually look at what President Trump is doing, what's possible, and also what's in both nations' best interests. But we'll be right back with more.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, and I hope you're looking forward to a wonderful 2026. Let me tell you about a couple of things you might be interested in that we're going to go on. Those are tours. We call them spiritual heritage tours. We're going this year in June and September to Washington, D.C. and George Washington's Mount Vernon. We're also going to Colonial Williamsburg and the historic Jamestown settlement. Then we're going also to Boston, Massachusetts. So All those tours are coming up in 2026. The D.C. and Williamsburg trip are both in June and September, so pick the month you want to go. The Boston trip is in September. So, for all the information, the itinerary, the cost, everything you need to know about these tours, if you want to join us on a vacation with a purpose, that's what we call it, go to wildmangroup.com. WILDMON group.com is the website. Find out all the information, and we'll see you on one of our 2026 tours.
The following is a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management.
I had a lot of credit card debt, and it stressed me out. But what I thought was a solution turned out to be a problem. I kept hearing ads about debt settlement that seemed too good to be true. And actually, it was. When I called, they told me to stop paying my bills. That didn't sound right to me at all, so I hung up. Later, I found out that debt settlement is bad, real bad. Then I learned that there is a right way to pay off your credit cards. It's called a debt management program from the great team at Trinity. Trinity had a plan. In the end, I paid off my bills, I saved thousands, and I even improved my credit score.
If credit card debt has you down, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
My name is Heather. Please forget debt settlement and remember Trinity Debt Management.
1-800-788-1813.
Hello, Americans. I'm Todd Starnes. Stand by for news and commentary next. There's no doubt what happened the other day in Minneapolis was a terrible tragedy. Also, no doubt that what happened could have been completely avoided. A 37-year-old activist shot and killed after she turned her car into a weapon, aimed the vehicle at an ICE agent, and hit the gas. The governor of Minnesota, the mayor of Minneapolis, outraged. Instead of urging calm, they poured gasoline on the fire. But it's important to examine the facts. ICE agents were conducting lawful activities in the neighborhood. The activists have been hounding the agents all day, attempted to interfere with official police action. And she used her van to block the street. That's what led to the confrontation. An ICE agent ordered her to get out of the vehicle. She refused his command and hit the gas. Had she just done as the officer had instructed, the activist would still be alive. I have much more to say about this story on my website, ToddStarnes.com.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back. And Minnesota is still dealing with the aftermath of the woman who was killed when she took her vehicle as a weapon and tried to ram it into an ICE agent who, of course, then used force to stop her. And the left is continuing to try to manipulate that story and take away from the fraud that is going on in Minnesota. That is actually the bigger story here. And there is a wonderful article that you need to read in the Epoch Times titled Fraud, Failure, and the Cost of Not Demanding Assimilation. Minnesota did not wake up one morning, this article says, and suddenly become a hub for fraud. What Americans are witnessing, large-scale welfare and childcare fraud, weak enforcement, political paralysis, and rising public anger is not random. It is the predictable downstream result of decades of policies made by people who would never have to live with the consequences and who faced few personal costs for getting it wrong. So this is by my good friend Kathi Barnett. She is also a radio host and political strategist and joins me this morning. So good morning, Kathi. And I think you are spot on this article.
Thank you so much, Jenna. It's so great to be here with you. Yes, there are so many people who would try to gaslight us and believing that, one, the fraud is not real, the fraud is real, and they would try to tell us that our anxiety is rooted in things that didn't really happen, but it did happen. And so I wanted to write this just to kind of put it into perspective, that we have very real issues. This is really happening, and that what we're feeling, that is very real.
Yeah, and I think it's absolutely correct for Americans to demand accountability and also demand not just accountability for the people in government who either were complicit or who turned a blind eye to this, but also accountability in terms of deportations of people who are complicit, didn't assimilate, obviously, and really don't deserve to be here.
Yeah, listen, assimilation is not a suggestion. It needs to, and it should not be optional. People who are coming from, specifically when we're talking about the Somali-related fraud, coming from a country that is, Donald Trump has some very unkind words in his description about it, but it is very true. They're coming from a region that is ruled by clan, that is ruled by tribal allegiances, and then and coming from an area that doesn't even have a formal government that is recognized by world powers. And so we pop them out of that region. We bring them over into a high-trust society, and then we allow them to effectively recreate Somalia, but with better Wi-Fi here in our own country. They don't have to assimilate. They don't have to speak our language, and they get all the benefits. And then we're scratching our head and wondering why people who come from a region where it's all about tribal allegiance and not civic union, you come here and suddenly they bring the same kind of ideas and ideology over here to our own country. This should not have taken anyone by surprise. But the fact that now this is, I just wrote another article for Epic Times, kind of weaving a common thread through all of this that we're experiencing. Many of us will look at these mini headlines and think that they're unconnected, but they're not. There's a common thread being woven through all of them, and I believe that thread is that the age of pretending there are no consequences for our choices is over. We pretended we could print money into ad infinitum and that there are no consequences. We pretended we could have blurred borders and nothing would happen as a result of that. We pretended that truth is relative, that morality is abstract, that a boy could be a girl could be a boy, and that there would be no consequences. We were literally pretending that we could have free trade, hollow out all of our major industries here in the country, send our jobs and training to other nations, and that somehow we would not become dependent upon our enemies. And so we could have kept the delusion going for some time, but I believe the world has been renegotiating the pecking order of supremacy for decades now. And now America is just getting into the battle, but we can no longer pretend that these consequences of our choices of allowing people to come to our nation, not forcing them to assimilate, and allowing politicians to create rules and policies that they're not tied to, and that the consequences of those decisions are not tied to them, that age of pretending is over.
So well said, and what a great point. Kathi Barnett, my special guest this morning, radio host and political strategist. You should follow her on X, read her articles in Epic Times. And, I think that this is the consequence, Kathi, of Republicans being too eager to, reach across the aisle, find common ground, not necessarily object to, what the left is doing, because, these types of consequences are so predictable. And I actually think this is something that the left wanted. When you look at what's going on in Minnesota and the fraud, and seeing the evidence that's coming out of people who Democrats who obviously knew about this and were complicit in it. This is something that they want. They have been advocates for diversity for decades, and saying, well, nobody needs to assimilate. Let's let the Somalis come in and rebuild their culture here. This isn't just a consequence that was sort of unforeseen. I think this was actually a strategic goal of the Democrats in order to break down Western civilization and the society that we live in America.
Absolutely. I think it was last night Elon Musk and Data Republican put out a list of the NGOs, the George Soros funded NGOs, and they listed the board members of many of these George Soros backed NGOs to show that the reason why nothing is being done, because you have both Republicans and Democrats been sitting on the boards of these Soros-funded NGOs. And so, and I used to say all the time when I was running for U.S. Senate here, when I was working with the, Vivek Ramaswamy campaign, is that we did not end up where we are by happenstance. Democrats could not do half the things they're doing if Republicans weren't complicit. And that became very, the awareness of that became very real as I was running my own campaign and now spending an exorbitant amount of time behind the curtain. You know this probably better than anyone, that Democrats couldn't do half the stuff that they're doing and getting away with if Republicans weren't complicit. It's not just that Republicans are trying to be polite and nice and clutching our pearls. The overwhelming majority is because they're just as complicit as the Democrats, and we need to wrap our minds around that and hold these people accountable and demand accountability.
Absolutely. And I think that is exactly why we don't see Congress codifying any of Trump's executive orders. They did at least, pass the one big beautiful bill that gave more funding to ICE and, border enforcement and all that. Maybe that's the one thing that they did through all of 2025. But overall, as it sits, the establishment GOP has never liked Donald Trump. They've never wanted to give over their power and their kind of half of the uniparty to an outsider who actually came in and wanted to make America great again and had other ideas besides lining their own pockets. And they really don't have the same vision, even under this banner of Republican, as Donald Trump and as genuine conservatives do. And I think this is the clash that we're headed for in the midterms, especially in 2026. I think this election coming up is going to determine the power differential between the establishment GOP and the conservative kind of, not necessarily MAGA wing, but those who saw what Donald Trump wants to do and want to head down the road that is away from kind of these establishment uniparty ideas that haven't worked. And we actually want and voted for the Trump mandate, which included things like being harder on immigration, accountability. And yet, look, I saw a thing, Kathi, last night from an account on X that was listing everyone, including me, by the way, who had been arrested during Biden's administration, and then said, how many people have been arrested under Trump's administration right now? Absolutely zero. No accountability for any of the damage. And so what is going on with Republicans?
They're complicit. It's so frustrated. You have sacrificed so much. You have put so much on the line in order to hold people accountable for the many things that have gone wrong. I have put myself out on the line. We know so many good people who have come to the forefront and say, this is the hill that I am willing to stake my life on. And we have been, Democrats did not play, and their justice was swift. Before we can even get home, I was at January 6th. I had a great time. I've never tried to pretend otherwise. We had a great time when we were there. We get on the bus. I'm halfway home, and I get a phone call that all hell was breaking loose up there. But before the dust could settle, before anything could be adjudicated, people had already been maligned and had already been judged. The jury has already come out and put out their verdict. And people paid very real prices. People have lost their lives. People have taken their own lives as a result of the lies that Democrats pushed surrounding January 6th, surrounding voting. And now for example, we have Renee Good, and all of a sudden I was on BBC and everybody is like, oh, well, we need to wait and find out what really happened. And the entire time I'm thinking to myself, where is the accountability? When Democrats were in office, the strong hand of the government came down very swiftly on so many of us. Today, we have yet to see anyone even being indicted, anyone even, or at least having what happened to Donald Trump with Mar-a-Lago and the helicopter swirling overhead and the police going in 10 cars deep. We haven't even seen that level of adjudication or holding anyone accountable. And I think it's right that the American people are upset about it, that MAGA, so many of us who have sacrificed so much to get this president elected 3 times. I think we're justified in being very leery, very, very upset about what has not been done yet. Mm-hmm. And I know people say, oh, it takes time. Okay, we've already gone a whole year yet. And I have seen Republicans have more galas and clinking champagne glasses with one another than I've seen them do anything else.
Yeah, and at this time in 2021, when Biden was in office, I was already getting subpoenas. I mean, they were on it because they had a plan for not justice, but lawfare. And we're not talking about just things that happened during the Biden administration, but things like accountability for the Russia collusion hoax. I mean, there's been no accountability for that. Anything that happened, obviously, with, the Mar-a-Lago raid, the Biden auto pen stuff, the Ukraine impeachment hoax. I mean, Benghazi, for crying out loud, which was way before that. Any accountability for COVID, for, all of the 2020 lawfare. Absolutely. And, and the dirty little secret, Kathi, that, you and I have talked about, of course, offline, is that this isn't just Democrats. There are, as we've been talking about, complicit Republicans as well. And this is why, I did sacrifice a lot to stand up for the truth, because the truth is it's not just Democrats. There are Republicans who were complicit in a lot of this and who deserve accountability as well. And it's not a matter of just being, if you're for Trump, then you're for every single Republican. It's a matter of actually looking at what happened, where the facts lead, and saying that, sometimes there are bad people and bad actors on both sides. And the truth is, it's not just black and white. Often you have to parse it and nuance. There's more nuance than that. And to be willing to stand up for the truth and actually call out people who were allegedly on your own team is even more difficult. And so this is why, though, it matters that there's accountability. And this is why it matters that there's accountability in Minnesota, kind of circling back to where we were at in the very beginning. Because if Republicans aren't going to have accountability and Trump's own DOJ is not going to have arrests for, any of these things that we've talked about, why should we expect any action to be taken on Minnesota fraud? When that's literally it's just the Democrats.
What the fraud that we've seen in Minnesota is unacceptable. What we're watching over the past weekend of just this George Floyd inspired rioting, right? You don't get to behave like that because you don't agree with something. You don't make yourself ungovernable. And this is something that I talk about all the time, is that our Constitution, right? It is just words on a piece of paper if the rules don't apply across the board. And to be quite frank, we as a people, we have, our founding fathers, they were very exact that our rights do not come from the government, that they have been endowed upon us by a creator. I am a free individual who get to live my life according to my own conscience, right? But as a republic, we have come together as a nation and said, okay, listen, we're in a high trust kind of society. We understand that there are responsibilities for freedom. And so we will abdicate some of those freedoms, right? Do I have the freedom because it's been endowed upon me to walk into a crowded building and scream fire? Yes, I absolutely do. But as a society, we've decided that's not good, that causes more harm than good. And so we have decided there are certain things we just will not do. And and so therefore we made ourselves governable. But what we're watching with these George Soros-backed NGOs and the things that are happening right now is that they are intentionally making themselves ungovernable. And our nation does not exist. It cannot exist for long when we allow people to be able to come out and spit in the faces of our officers, to dox them, to track them, to malign them, to get into their impede the business that they're doing. We cannot long survive. So the Trump
Absolutely.
administration
And we are already out of time. Kathi Barnett, you can follow her, Kathi, for the number 4 truth, and we will be right back with more.
The term providence means God's superintending care over his creation.
America's Providential History with Stephen McDowell.
God is at work performing his will in history. And so through this podcast, we're going to be taking a look at the providence of God in the history, and in particular in the history of America.
America's Providential History. Available now on the podcast page at afr.net.
You say you're a Christian, but when it comes right down to it, what are you basing that on? A prayer you once prayed? Coming forward during an altar call? The fact that your parents are Christians? Someone telling you you're saved? Well, Scripture gives a different standard, as you'll see in John MacArthur's study called Examine Yourself on Grace to You.
Hi, I'm Doug Chamberlain, host of Family Health Checkup. For over 30 years, Samaritan members have come together to share medical costs and lift each other up in prayer. Now, I'm excited to tell you about Redeem Health Share Ministry, Samaritan's next generation of healthcare sharing. Redeem offers affordable, flexible programs that reflect your values and help you manage medical costs with confidence. Each month, members contribute a share amount to help pay each other's medical bills, and you choose the providers and treatments that are right for your family. It's not insurance, it's a community of believers supporting one another through life's health challenges. So, whether it's a routine visit or a sudden emergency, there's a caring Christian community walking with you every step of the way. Redeem Health Share. It's more than healthcare. It's hope. It's healing. It's faith in action. Call 1-844-REDEEM-0 today. Join the movement. Share joyfully. Live redeemed.
Do you believe in the absolute inerrancy of God's holy word? Do you believe in the power of the Holy Spirit to radically change lives and empower us to live like Christ? At Wesley Biblical Seminary, we believe God is raising up a movement of people across our nation and across the world who hold fast to the authority of the Bible and the hope of holiness. We are working today to equip tomorrow's pastors and Christian leaders through biblical and theological education in practical ministry that's accredited, affordable, online, and highly personal. Our programs include undergraduate, master's, and doctoral degrees, certificate programs, and even training for lay people. So whatever your next step is in being equipped for ministry, we're here for you. And if you believe these are the kinds of pastors we need leading our churches in the future, we invite you to learn more about partnering with us through giving. Learn more about Wesley Biblical Seminary by visiting us at wbs.edu today.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back. Well, Minnesota, while being in a state of investigating fraud, their governor is not running for re-election. Some Republicans are stepping up, including Mike Lindell. Yes, the CEO of MyPillow is running for governor of Minnesota, and I had the opportunity to interview him on my latest podcast. You can find that on demand with Jenna Ellis at afr.net. Click podcast, click the icon for on demand, or you can listen on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts. That is on demand with Jenna Ellis. So did a wide-ranging interview with Mike Lindell and wanted to play a portion of it for you, but to listen to the entire interview, of course, go to the podcast. But here is a portion of that interview with Mike Lindell. With all of this that's going on in Minnesota, what is your vision, Mike Lindell, for your home state and what you want to do if elected to governor?
Well, I've got we just had our first debate last night, by the way, and but I've got solutions for each thing, each platform. Right now, especially let's just go with those welfare platforms. Well, if you get rid of the fraud, you stop the fraud. I mean, that should be done immediately, and you put the people that have done it in prison, and then you deport all the illegals. I said it could be over 50% that have done this are illegal, and they're here illegally. But then you got to look into these welfare platforms, and that's where I really have a great thing. It's almost plug-in for the using the private sector and our tax dollars, but it reduces it about 80%. Imagine all these welfare programs that are out there, from child care to food to all these things. If you could reduce them that much, even if it's 50%, it's a huge savings to taxpayers. And a lot of people don't want to pay their taxes for certain things, but this platform that I have is the private sector money. They can kind of pick and choose. Hey, I want to put my money here. People want to help generally, but they don't want to put money into things they don't believe in or that doesn't work. So that's one thing. The other thing is, we have a huge problem with these cities now, like Minneapolis. They're basically becoming empty cities, or Portland, or these big cities around the country, and for a couple of reasons. One is obviously people are in fear. You have safety. And I work with Rudy Giuliani, who's actually on my network, Lindell TV, and what he did to New York and cleaned up New York and was amazing. And I'm going to be using him for advice on that, but for the safety part. But also, you have another thing going on with these empty box stores. I went down, Minnesota, we had the first mall in the United States, Southdale Mall. I went down there a couple of weeks before Christmas, and I was just going, wow, where have all the people gone? And a lot of it is because everybody's buying off the internet. And, these box stores and these small businesses, you're paying sales tax there, they're paying real estate tax, they're paying rent, and you have to level that field. And I've got a great program where I'm going to eliminate the sales tax in these box stores and stuff. And there, so you're going to pay your sales tax buying on Amazon or MyPillow or anything online, but you should be able to go into these places and balance this teeter-totter to bring the people back, and with not only be safe, but also getting at least equal deals, and then you have education. I have education. I've dealt with we have big problems with the teachers' unions in Minnesota, but we also have problems with the classrooms. And when you have people from completely another third world, and they're in the classrooms, or you have kids that just have problems. The teachers can't discipline more, and the regulations, you can't even move them out of class, so everybody's suffering. And I want to do, I'm going to do a lot of stuff with vouchers, charter schools. I've studied it all, like in Detroit, I worked with them a few years ago. So basically everything I've touched, the farmers, I just met with the farmers. We have, in Minnesota, we have a great opportunity for it's sustainable aviation fuel, and it's made out of corn. And this is an industry that will bring corn prices to a sustainable, where we're using our own. We are self-sustaining here in the United States for our farmers, and stabilize the grain market, the corn market. And Minnesota is perfect for that, as we have a pipeline from where this stuff can be made right to the Minneapolis airport. So what I've done, Jenna, is looked at every single problem and said, here's the solution. And I'll give you one other one is, when I went in the first administration, my passion has been to help addicts, help the homeless. I put millions of dollars into your Teen Challenge, your Salvation Armies, your Union Gospels, getting people off addiction and getting people to Jesus. But during the first administration, I'm very good friends with Ben Carson, and they came up with a program. The first place was going to be L.A., and the mayor and the governor of California was in all agreement. It's a great program where you're taking all your people from the street, your homeless, your addicts, and also your people that have mental issues. Remember, in the early 1970s, when One Flew Over the Cuckoo Nest came out, and then Geraldo went in to validate if this stuff was really going on, our mental institutions across the country were shut down, and 3 million people were released into the streets, basically. That number, they say, could be as high as 20 million now. So you go to the streets, and you take everyone off the street, and you bring them to these federal, they're like maybe like a tent city, so to speak, or federal building land, and you're sorting them. You're basically bringing them in, and they do a lot of this in Colorado Springs, Colorado, in a way, where all your things are in one place. Now you sort them. You take the addicts and you get them help, and a lot of it will be private, or like your Teen Challenge, your Salvation Armies, and you're using money to subsidize them because you're getting them off the streets, you're getting them the help you need, and then also you bring back the institutions that can help the mentally impaired, the people that have problems there. But now we have technologies that are 100 times better than in early 1970. And then the last piece is the homeless, and that's the easiest one because a lot of them are out there. There are programs out there that are already out there, but they've become almost a way of life in a lot of these places. And this was going to be an amazing program, but what stopped it? The China virus came in, and it was like a parked car. Well, I recently got the blueprints for that, and that's going to be launched immediately when I become governor. So I'm very excited because I think I'm the only one that has all the solutions to solve these problems. And then they asked me last night during the debate, well, how are you going to get the suburban people? How are you going to get elected? And I said, well, in Minnesota, 200,000 people voted for Donald Trump in the 2020 election, and they didn't vote in the 2022 election. You know me, Jenna, I'm going to be very persistent. If I have to go door to door, you got to get out and vote. And also, I'm also going to be able to go to the inner city in Minneapolis and St. Paul and turn people that traditionally have voted Democrat because they have big concerns over the illegals that are here taking all their resources, and you need a different input to get a different output.
Yeah, and as you're describing all of this, Mike Lindell, I mean, this is the contrast between someone who's a conservative and actually loves America, loves your home state of Minnesota, wants to see people genuinely thrive and experience the American dream and liberty, and having all of these policies in all of these different areas that you're discussing. What a contrast from what Minnesota leadership has done over Tim Walz's tenure and even further back from that. And it's just such a contrast between a Republican versus a Democrat in terms of whether it's a policy that actually benefits people or it only benefits themselves and the segments that they want to promote. And so, where do you think the difficulty is then in getting that turnout and getting people in Minnesota to understand, hey, we want Republican leadership because these policies actually work where Democrats clearly don't?
Right. And I'm going to backtrack a little bit. I wanted to say this, too. Another thing I'm going to do that's a big problem in Minnesota and in our nation. When I spoke at the Rose Garden, it got to be, it was very famous, went worldwide when this was March of 2020 before we all went into lockdown. And I said, a nation has turned its back on God. We have taken God out of our schools. We need to get back in the Word. We read our Bibles and get back with our families. And as you know, Jen, I've lived the American dream on steroids. I mean, going from an addict to where I was with this company, but it's all been by the grace of God. And one of the things that Minnesota has done that probably worse than in most other states, we turned our back on God, and our leadership did. Waltz put a satanic statue right in the middle of our Capitol, and you guys can look this up. You can't make this up. He got an award for that from the Satanists. It's still at the Capitol. That's going to be gone the first day. Minnesota is the Trojan horse for Sharia law. That will be another thing. 8 states have passed laws against that, and Minnesota needs to pass that now. Our businesses, when we have to do stuff and stop our assembly lines and stuff because of what they want, and it doesn't fit with our Constitution. This needs to be stopped. But so I think to get people out. I've got a great plan. I'm going to be one of this is doing, I'm going to educate the people. So it's basically education. You can throw out all the 1-minute ads you want and blame, look at these Democrats, look what they're doing here. I think the people need to be educated. What are the solutions? And that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to do it. I'm going to make one of which I'm very good at is marketing. And imagine half-hour infomercials that are out there instead of these little 1 or 2 minute ad things you put out. And you put them out also on social media. People need to be educated. What are the solutions? And not a farmer out in western Minnesota. He needs a different solution. It doesn't, he's not thinking about the inner city of Minneapolis. He's not the suburbs that I live in Minnesota. He's not, every place has a different footprint and a different problem. So you educate them. What's going to affect me? What are you going to do? Problem, solution, and to help all people, not just a party or a self-serving agenda. When people make decisions in politics, what I've learned in the last 5 years is I've fought both Republicans and Democrats alike to secure our election platforms. I've probably met more politicians and know more now than most people. And what I've learned is if they make decisions that don't help any people, I don't care what party you're in, I'm talking to people now, they have an agenda. It's a self-serving agenda, and it's usually a very evil agenda. And one of the things, so I think it's educating people, just like I did a year and a half ago. Me and Mayor Rudy Giuliani, I went to the Democrat convention, and I went in there, and I went there for a reason. I wanted to go deep into the city of Chicago, and we talked to people that were switching from traditionally voting Democrat to voting that were going to vote for Donald Trump, and we asked them why, and the reasons that came out of their mouths was so important, and it was like, hey, the illegals are taking all our resources, whether it's healthcare, whether it's filling up our hotels, even our treatment centers, and they had it, and I think to be able to educate people going, hey, there's a better way. You need a different input to get a different output. That's what I'm going to do. It's educating them. Here's the solution, and here's where traditionally we're just getting basically boiled like goldfish. I mean, you're boiled like frogs or whatever, and that's what's been going on. And they just accelerate it all. And now with this fraud and everything, now you can point and say, hey, we've got to fix the fraud and stuff, but we've also got to fix all of these platforms at the same time. And they asked me last night during the debate, well, what do you see Minnesota looking like in 4 years? A lot of people on that stage are going, this is going to take years to fix and years to fix. I said, you know what? With God, all things are possible. And I'm telling you, I don't go into just like a My Pillow and the attacks that it's taken for 3 years. I don't go just to one department and say, oh, boy, we better look into this. Let's spend a month on this and see how things come out during the third quarter, blah, blah, blah. No, you get on it immediately, and you do it on a parallel track, horizontally, wherever you watch everything every day, and I'll be the most transparent governor this country's ever seen, communicating with the people, and not only that, the leaders that are leading in Minnesota, these other departments. And if they're a bad leader, they're going to be called out, or if their department, just like they're getting called out now for the fraud. So it's accountability. But I'm really excited actually with this. Knowing that I really feel I can make a huge difference and in a very accelerated pace.
All right, well, that was a portion of my interview with Mike Lindell. You can find the entire podcast on demand with Jenna Ellis at afr.net. Click podcasts and then on demand, or you can find it wherever you stream. And as always, you can reach me and my team, Jenna at afr.net.